Today, I would like to explain the concept of a Bahnhof, train station. For those who have never seen the inside of a train, you probably have a rough idea of what this term entails. For the average person, it's quite straightforward. A train station is the place where they can board or disembark from a train, where there is at least one platform, a departure schedule, perhaps even a building with toilets, a newsstand, a bakery, and so on. Fundamentally, this isn't entirely incorrect. However, I'm not looking at the train station from the perspective of an ordinary citizen. Instead, I'm examining it from a railway operations standpoint. I won't be listing any superlatives about train stations here, such as the tallest, longest, coldest, or the one with the most tracks, passengers, or train journeys. You can find all of that in the Guinness Book of Records. Instead, I will show you, through graphics, photos, and videos, the role of the train station and its smaller siblings in railway operations, as well as the differences in design and use. The definition of a train station can be found in paragraph 4, section 2 of the Railway Construction and Operation Regulations, EBO. Train stations are railway facilities with at least one switch where trains are allowed to start, terminate, diverge, or turn around. So, the crucial criteria are not the platform, the schedule, a restroom, etc., but rather the switch. In other words, without a switch, there is no train station. However, this does not mean that wherever there is a switch, we necessarily have a train station. More on that later. The layout of a train station follows a logical pattern. However, these facilities are not mass-produced but tailored to local needs. Although many train stations resemble each other, upon closer inspection, each one has its unique characteristics. According to EBO, common to all train stations is that they are delimited either by entrance signals, trapezoid signs, or, in particularly simple operational circumstances, by the entrance switch. We'll get into the counterpart to the train station, the open track, later as well. I'll start with the most Spartan form of a train station, one that actually manages with just one switch. The main signals are symbolically depicted because the design of the train station is independent of the signaling system and the interlocking technology. It becomes evident that with such a station that doesn't even allow for train crossings, there isn't much you can do. Nevertheless, there are a few such minimal train stations, for example, Kremen in Brandenburg, where a regional train line turns around on a dead-end track. To be reasonably flexible in its use, a train station should have at least two switches. A standard single-track crossing station looks like this: 2 switches, 2 entrance signals, and 4 exit signals. However, there are variations here as well. In this simplified version with only 1 exit signal per direction, only crossings are possible, but overtaking is not. Even turning around is difficult because a train can enter the lower track from the left but cannot exit to the left since there is no exit signal and therefore no starting signal. Conversely, it can exit to the left from the upper track, but it cannot enter from the left because a destination signal is missing. For a turnaround, the train would have to be shunted to the neighboring track after arriving or leave the station with written orders. Theoretically, such a small train station can be expanded as needed. There are distinctions between through main tracks, indicated in green, which continue from one or more mainline tracks within the station, non-through main tracks, the blue crossing and overtaking tracks, and the gray depicted sidings, which can only be used for shunting purposes. Whether the exit signals are at the same level or staggered depends on the location, such as the required track lengths or visibility conditions. Even on double-track lines, especially small train stations often exhibit typical design features. A common variant includes overtaking tracks that serve both directions, while through main tracks can often only be traveled in one direction. Another popular option is overtaking in the middle without regard for oncoming traffic. Operationally desirable is the configuration with overtaking tracks located on the outside, ideally with a switch trapezoid for each station head. In Germany, there is usually only one simple switch connection per side or no crossover capability at all. It is also evident that switches are typically found at the station heads but not in the middle of the station. While such an arrangement is conceivable, it would restrict the possibilities for train and track utilization. Railway crossings are also mostly located at the periphery because they are protected by the entrance and exit signals and are seldom blocked by stationary trains. Platforms are merely decorative additions to all of this. They can be designed as external, middle, or non-platforms that require crossing the tracks. In many train stations, there are no platforms because passenger stops have been discontinued or the facility has always served operational purposes only. Due to dismantling, some partially grotesque configurations have arisen that make limited sense. In these cases, only one overtaking track remains, but it does not match the arrangement of the crossover switches. In some cases, train stations have been so drastically altered that only the main track survived. However, no matter how much the infrastructure is trimmed down, the possibility always remains to start, terminate, diverge, or turn around trains. Long, elongated facilities sometimes consist of multiple parts. Here, the freight station on the left and the passenger station on the right. In addition to entrance and exit signals, intermediate signals are used. Depending on their layout and position in the railway network, we distinguish various types of train stations, although the boundaries can sometimes blur. The track layout diagrams shown earlier depicted intermediate stations, which make up most of all train stations. Relatively rare are terminal stations, either as terminus or through stations, depending on whether the tracks end at a buffer stop or converge once again. Separation or junction stations resemble each other and only differ in that in a separation station, trains switch from one track to another, while in a junction station, passengers must transfer. However, this is not set in stone and depends more on the timetable design than the infrastructure itself. At crossing and junction stations, sections of the railway tracks run parallel to each other. In the first case, the tracks preferably cross each other without level crossings to the right or left, while in the second case, they diverge again without having crossed. Then there's the tower station, where tracks intersect on different levels and are interconnected by connecting curves. As I mentioned earlier, a clear boundary between these various station types cannot always be drawn, especially when more than two tracks are involved. For such complex configurations, the term junction station has become common, although operationally, all these categorizations are not significant, as the regulations do not differentiate between a village station with two switches and a major city hub with multiple incoming tracks and several platforms. Additionally, there is a distinction based on architectural designs, which are defined by the location of the station buildings. In earlier times, these buildings were the focal point of every station. Today, very few of them serve their original purpose. Many have been demolished, fallen into disrepair, or sold. The precise location of a station is traditionally determined by the midpoint of the station building, as indicated by the track kilometer markings. The largest group by far consists of through stations with a station building on the side. In terminal stations, it is usually located transversely behind the dead-end tracks. In wedge stations, it is found in the wedge formed by the diverging tracks, while in island stations, it is surrounded by railway tracks, and in rider stations, it is constructed over the tracks. There are also mixed forms, such as Dresden Hauptbahnhof, which is a combination of a terminal and island station. We've already discussed switches that do not belong to a station and the concept of the open track. Stations are the kings, or at least the big brothers, among the operational facilities presented below. In stations, no matter how stripped down the facilities may be, all operational possibilities are available. On the open track, however, operations are more limited. The key difference is that in a station, shunting can be done, which means trains can move back and forth relatively freely to change locomotives, strengthen or weaken trains, and service track connections. This is not possible, or only under special conditions, on the open track. Let's first look at the halt point, which, from the perspective of an average person, does not differ from a train station because they can board and disembark here. According to EBO, Railway Construction and Operation Regulations, definition, halt points are railway facilities without switches where trains are scheduled to stop, start, or terminate. Unlike a station, they must have a platform. However, the starting or terminating function applies only to halt points at the end of a branch line, where the track ends at a buffer stop. Trains cannot simply reverse from all other halt points. Instead, the affected train must reverse into the station, which is only possible with written orders and at a maximum speed of 20 kilometers per hour. Additional switchless operational facilities on the open track include block posts, which ensure the necessary spacing between consecutive trains and provide protection for danger points like movable bridges. Switches on the open track can be found at connection points, turnout connection points, branching points, and crossover points. For instance, connection points and turnout connection points are used to connect loading tracks or industrial facilities, although this is now a rare occurrence. To service these points, the main track must be blocked, and trains operate as blocking movements from the station to the connection point and perform shunting there. At connection points, the track remains blocked until the blocking movement has returned or arrived at the next station. At turnout connection points, the blockage can be lifted once the train is enclosed in the connection point, and the main track is secured by flank protection devices. At branching points, trains can switch from one track to another. Whether the branching track disappears or runs parallel doesn't matter. Since, by definition, a railway track can be at most double track, such connections automatically become branching points when there are 3 or more adjacent tracks. On the other hand, crossover points are switch connections within a single track, whether it's for switching between the 2 tracks or transitioning from single track to double track. There can be various configurations behind such constructs. It could be one of the mentioned truncated stations, a branching point between 2 single-track lines, or a crossover point on a double-track line. The specific type of operational facility can be determined based on the signal locations and designations alone. In addition, there are also haltestellen, halting places, behind which haltepunkt, halt points, are concealed, often equipped with connections.